This week on Shift Points, we cover all of the updates that Dad has done to this car over the last 30 years. Thank you guys so much for joining. Parking outside, and there was a ton of He started this project. Found a piece of brass he's going to take. Alright everyone. Alright guys, we actually started working on the 55, and then we got to talking about all the different stuff that Dad has done over the past 30 years of working on this thing, making improvements along the way. And I decided that, hey, it might not be a bad idea to just do a video just on the updates, right? We can kind of talk you guys through this. I know I've done some shorts and some reels on YouTube and on social media to kind of talk about that stuff, really short little clips, but I thought it might be good to just kind of have a whole video here in one place that just kind of talks about the updates, like I said, that he's done slowly but surely over the past 30-ish years or so, not constantly in those 30 years, but making little bits and pieces and changes and different parts and pieces that he's bought along the way. So I'm going to let him do most of the talking again this week, but I think it would be, like I said, I think it makes sense to let this kind of live in its own video, and then we'll probably touch these different pieces again, of course, as we work and get the car going and get it back to the racetrack. To start this off, what we're going to do is just basically start at the front of the car and work our way back. Dad wants to talk about especially is the work and the time that he's put into making sure that there's no bump steer in this car. Meaning that as the suspension travels in the front, the wheels and tires stay perfectly straight the whole travel of it. And he's going to tell you a lot more of the details of it, but that's going to be kind of the first thing we talk about here.
This thing hit real hard on Thanksgiving Day in '94, and it tweaked a bunch of stuff on the front end. So we had to, me and Dad actually straightened the frame rails on it, got that put back, and we put some stiffeners here on top of the frame rails, and spent quite a bit of time just stiffening the chassis up as cars progressed and started getting putting a lot of horsepower. Now this car's not got that much, but I started seeing like the back end of the cars they started being built like a bridge, and the front too. So I started doing some stuff to try to stiffen both ends of the chassis up. And while we were doing that, met a real good friend of mine. He was a real good friend of mine. His name was Fred Turner. Fred, Clyde Mendenhall, we worked on this thing. They helped me with this. Fred was an old pro stock racer. He raced, he started building pro stock cars early 70s. He worked with people that I'd read about for years. He worked with Don Carlton. He was real good friends with Jerry Joyce. Fred said that Jerry Joyce was a genius when it came to chassis design, and Fred worked with him quite a bit. Fred was on a first name basis with Ronnie Sox, but anyway, Fred was very knowledgeable about this stuff, and he was a big help. He really helped me with this. So we shortened the rack, made the tie rods longer, moved the rack back and up, which took. You can take an indicator on this thing now. This thing has got about 1/16 of an inch of toe in as it travels through 3 inches of travel. It's got about 1/16, so there's practically no bump steer whatsoever. So that's what we kind of focused on up here. Ended up we built a new set of headers. These headers are 2 1/4. The old headers that came off the car were 2 1/8. Not a huge amount of difference. Just motors, the cylinder heads are considerably bigger, the ports are considerably bigger, intake and exhaust ports are considerably bigger. Okay, Brad Taylor ported these cylinder heads. He ported the intake manifold. These cylinder heads have been cut so much, angle milled so much to get some compression in them. Ended up with spacers, big block, tall deck spacers. And this is a short deck block, so a lot of work on this stuff. And I'll be fair with you, this is stuff that if this thing don't work, it's my fault. I won't say that if it does work, it's because of something I did, because there's been a lot of people that really helped me with this thing, and they've done some really good work. So we're going to try to get all of our thinking together and see what we can do with this car. Right now, that's the basic stuff that's going on in the front of the car. One of the main things with this car that I've wanted since for years, I talked a little bit about it in the first video concerning building this car, but one of the main things I wanted to focus on is I've said straight drive, but to be fair with you, I've wanted one of these LENCOs since the 70s. First one I ever saw, I thought, man, that's a trick. You don't shift a LENCO. People that's fool with them, you don't really shift them. You disengage a set of planetaries and apply a set of clutches. So as you start pulling the sticks coming from the front to the rear, it just disengages that set of planetaries. These planetaries in this thing is a 137, 137, and a 131. So it ends up with about a 245 low gear. The Power Glide was a 176. We got 538 gears in the back now, and that's not fixed. I don't know if we're going to end up with 538s as the final thing or not, but I've got it. They're pretty much wore out, so we're going to take it and test it and see what it does. We're going to try to get as much data out of this thing as we possibly can. We'll have a race pack on it, so we should be able to tell what kind of RPMs the engine's turning as it goes through, where we're going to shift it and all that stuff. We've got to figure that out. But again, one of the main focuses on this car is I wanted to try to learn to run this LENCO. The clutch I've got is adjustable every way from Sunday. The transmission is totally adjustable as far as how hard you can apply the clutches and all that stuff. I've got to he's going to help me a lot. He's going to be the key on this race pack, Jake is, so he can translate the information that we get and see what we need to do to tweak it. But this thing is adjustable every way from Sunday. So big learning curve. I think the race pack will make that learning curve a lot shorter, but there's still, for us actually, it's going to be a pretty steep learning curve. So.
One thing I did want to talk about here that I can actually have a little bit of input on is the new BEL housing, the new can here. This can we actually got, how long ago now, Dad? Years ago. But anyway, it's been a long time ago now. We got this can. It's a trick titanium can. And I'll tell you, it blew my mind. This was kind of the first instance whenever I kind of realized just kind of the difference that some of this stuff can make. I got in the car and actually went to pull the old steel BEL housing out and just everything I could at the time to pick it up and strain it, almost get it out. And when Dad handed me the titanium one to set in, it was like you could grab it with one hand and set in there. So in one of our shorts when we talked about this, Trick Titanium actually commented back to us and said this is probably about a third of the weight of what the steel one was. So it's pretty massive, that difference. So we've talked about it before. With the LENCO, it's heavier than the Power Glide. There's different stuff that we've tried to do to save weight and cut weight on this thing, but we're thinking it's probably going to end up kind of being a wash, probably in the 2,700 pound area, give or take a little. We do have a full set of scales now, so we can scale this car and get a really good number of when we get it down on the floor and we actually get it ready. But things like that can was found on eBay. We found it on eBay. Dad went to Georgia and picked it up, like I said, a long time ago now. That's just something that we've done, little things, little in quotations, little things that we've tried to do to make a difference and kind of offset the difference between the LENCO and the Power Glide.
Another thing that we did while this car's been down, had a few hours to kind of do some stuff to this thing. I made built a fixture that goes off the carrier bearing saddles, and it projects stiff piece of 1-inch stock to the outside, and I was able to hang indicators on this thing and check the straightness on the axle housing, and it was off. Best I can remember, it was off about 80 thousandths, and I was able to warm that housing up and tweak it, let it shrink and cool, and I got the axle housing straight. It was actually a noticeable difference and the effort it took to rotate the axles when I got the spool and the ring and pinion back in. It was a noticeable. It wasn't huge, but it was noticeably easier to roll. The car is really easy to roll in the floor now. Like say we're trying to do some work with the bearings and the seals and stuff like that. Another thing that we was talking about Fred Turner there a few minutes ago. Fred woke me up to a lot of things that I had really never thought about. It came out of his pro stock days, and he said that he worked with Don Carlton, and Don Carlton had told him at one time that you could tell if a part for a race car was too heavy. And Fred said he asked him, how was that? And he said, if you throw it up and it comes back down, it's too heavy. So I always thought that was interesting. It kind of changed my way of thinking on stuff. I mean, this car is by no means really lightweight, but I've tried to take some weight out of it in places it's non-structural, it won't hurt it. It wouldn't affect the way the car runs. And I've actually had to put weight back in it in places to stiffen the chassis up. And again, a lot of this thinking, if this thing screws up, you'll see. If you folks will stick with us and we get this thing to the racetrack, you'll see if we have succeeded or if we've messed up. So just stick with us and we'll see how this works out.
He pulled the cover off the rear end here, so kind of talk through what you got here.
Well, we've always run a Dana 60 on this thing, and I really like a Dana 60 rear end. The ring gear is bigger than a 9-inch Ford. Only drawback to Dana 60 is the setup. You have to do it, either pull the whole housing out of the car, or you have to lay down and do it under the car. So, but a few things that I did, that's beside the point, a few things that I've done to this thing due to the straight drive and kind of anticipating it's going to put a whole lot more pressure on things leaving. I put a set of steel bearing caps on the 60. I think we got them from Strange. It's been a while since I put these in, but you have to cut the bearing surface, the load surface on these caps to set the crush on the bearings. So anyway, we got that done. That's been several years ago. And the other thing that I had found and kind of looked at is this. It's a TA rear end girdle for this car. If you look, it's got tabs here that actually just touch the bearing caps. Helps to prevent trying to push the spool and the ring gear out of the axle housing. So just trying to take some precautions here. All this stuff's new to me. It's stuff we never used before. So just kind of anticipating this thing being quite a bit more. The car before weighed 2,700 pounds, and I don't know what it's going to weigh this time. I've lightened up the car in places. Other places like the LENCO is much heavier. So I don't know, it's probably going to be about a wash. Car probably weighed 2,800 pounds, I guess, and that was with me in it. So that much weight and leaving is hard. I'm going to try to make this thing leave. I'm just trying to take every precaution to make sure this thing has a little bit more of a chance of living. So
just a quick reminder, kind of going through this stuff. You know, I know Dad mentioned it in the interview that I got him to do last week. I know he mentioned it, but like basically everything that we're going to do with this car, the parts that we're going to use, he already has. A big majority of them he already has, actually. So we know that there's stuff that is better, that has been more updated, that costs a lot more than we could probably afford at this point. So this car, how it is set up, and you'll probably see different times throughout these videos, you go, well, you could go to so-and-so and get this and that. Yeah, we know we do, and we're gonna try and do what we're trying to do, which is make this thing go in the 4s and the 8th. Our plan is to try and do it with what we already have. Now, in the future, will there be upgrades? Hopefully. Hopefully you guys love this and you subscribe and you do all the things and you follow us and you buy t-shirts and all that stuff. And it makes it where we can buy more speed parts and make this thing go faster, easier. But like I said, right now, as the time goes, we're going to use what we have and we're going to try and make this thing go. So just keep that in mind as we go through these parts and different stuff like that. This is some of the nicest stuff that we've ever had by any means, but we do know there are other stuff out there available. We're just going to use what we got though.
Okay, one of the things that's critical in my thinking to this situation that we're getting into is the 4-link slash double adjustable shocks, wishbone, this whole situation. And I'm not going to go into, there's a lot of opinions. If you start looking into that, the way this thing is supposed to be set up, there's a lot of different opinions. I have mine. I feel like I've got pretty good confidence in it. There's a lot of videos, there's a lot of information online that you can go into, but you kind of have to, your mileage may vary. You're gonna get into stuff and you're gonna have to either test it yourself or have confidence in the people that you're talking to. I'm not gonna say this is what you need to do. I'm saying this is what we're gonna do, and these are the kind of the guidelines that we're gonna try to follow to make this. I'm gonna try to make this car hook and get to 60 foot as best I possibly can. The 4-link settings, I'm not even going into that right now, but these shocks they've got 5 inches of travel. Like I say, these are strange, double adjustable. They're adjustable on the compression and the extension, which I think it's marked on it rebound, but it's the extension of the shock is adjustable, which the way I'm going to set this car up, the extension is going to be, in my opinion, more critical than the compression, because I'm going to try to set this car up so that the rear end actually extends, pushes down out of the car as the car leaves. Again, there's all kinds of opinions on this, and I'm just telling you what I'm going to do. You look into it yourself when you start to set your car up, and you fix it for yourself. This is what we're going to try to do. That's the reason that the extension adjustment timing on these shocks, in my opinion, is so critical. The instant centers and all that stuff, all that information, again, is online. One of the people that I've watched and I don't think he'd mind me mentioning his way of thinking, because I'm from what I've seen, I'm in total agreement with it. Is Kevin Wilson, SBC. It's a YouTube channel, and in my thinking, he's really up on, and he's got a lot more information than I'm going to try to get into here. He's better at it. He's really good to listen to, in my opinion. So
Dad was talking about it earlier on kind of some of the structural stuff that he's done. It was kind of I remember as I was a kid, we live only about an hour and a half from Bristol Motor Speedway and Bristol Dragway, and we would go there every year basically to the NHRA Nationals that were the national event there at Bristol pretty much as long as I can remember. I was a little kid from the time that we went. But anyway, it seemed like every time we would go, Dad would see something. He would go to the Pro Stock pits, and that's one of the cool things about going to those events is you can get pretty much right up on the car, at least at that time especially. And every time he would kind of see something that they were doing structurally with their chassis, that was something he was always looking at and kind of taking mental notes every time we would go there. And he has taken that and added a bunch of structure in here, added some bars, and he would have to come over here and tell you all the different bars that he's added. But he's kind of went and really stiffened this whole rear section of the chassis up, adding some X bracing, adding some triangulation like these bars right here, just to get this super stiff, just to help it. You know what I mean? You know, these chassis in the drag cars, I mean, you got to have that rigidity in the chassis to make sure that when you make a change, that it actually affects what you want it to, you know, in the suspension. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff like that he has done just from, like I said, going to national events and kind of seeing the stuff that pro stockers and different people were doing, taking that and then applying it to this car here. So that's kind of that.
Okay, another thing that's going to be different. Well, actually, a couple of things in the rear on this car that's going to be completely different from anything we've ever done before. The old wheelie bars were on this car were 40 inches, and they were spring loaded, and they were okay. But I'm thinking if this car does what I'm hoping it will do, it's going to hit pretty much a lot harder. We talked about the low gear ratio and compared to the rear end gear. It's about 13 to 1 in low gear now, and before with the Paraglide, it was actually about 9 to 1 final drive in low gear. So I'm thinking it's going to be, hopefully we make it hit the wheelie bars and actually use the wheelie bars more than we have. The other thing is, I think we've talked about in an earlier video, I'm going to try to make this car separate. When it leaves, I want the rear suspension, I want the rear end to push down out of the car. Not a lot, but enough to actually put the weight onto the chassis when the car leaves. Again, as hard as I'm thinking, hoping, I guess, this car is going to leave, you've got to control that downward motion, that separation. So again, here I've never had double adjustable shocks. I've never had shocks that you could control the extension on. The old shocks were you could control the compression, but not the extension. These I can make the extension. I can slow the extension down so I don't just hammer the slicks, just drive them into the ground. I can slow that down, but still yet make the car separate and work like we're trying to get it to work. We've upgraded the drive shaft. Of course, the Paraglide, the drive shaft for the Paraglide was considerably longer than this drive shaft. So got in touch with Mark Williams. They made us a real nice chrome moly drive shaft. Talked to the folks at Strange, and I had always had a factory yoke on the rear end on the differential. I'd always had this no stock cast yoke. Well, talk to the folks at Strange. They made a really nice billet yoke, which ended up about a ½ inch longer, which put that drive shaft exactly where it needed to be. That's much heavier duty than we had before. The other stuff worked great, worked fine, no problem. But again, going back to this, not knowing exactly how hard this thing's going to hit, kind of trying to overkill. That's the reason we went to 40 spline axles on this to kind of just for like an insurance policy. The 35s might have done fine. The other thing that we did, it kind of made me think, the other thing we did when we changed the axles, this thing always had Strange axles in it. It had 35 splines in it before. Called folks up at Strange, got them to send me a set of 40 spline rifle drilled axles and a lightweight spool. And that, I weighed the parts that came out, and I weighed the parts that we put in, and we actually knocked 5 pounds off going to a 40 spline axle, which I was real tickled about that too.
All right, guys, I think that's pretty much good. That pretty much has the updates covered at this point, give or take a little. I'm sure there's going to be some stuff that we run into as we're going along here that, oh yeah, we remember we did this, we want to tell you about that. But I thought it would be cool and made a lot of sense to at least have this in one place where if you guys are new, which we do have quite a few new subscribers since Dad's interview went out. So thank you guys so much for coming and watching that and then subscribing off of that. So we wanted to let you guys know, we gave you the history, now we kind of give you the middle step, which was some of the parts and pieces and things that we've done to improvements over the 30-year gap since the car last run. And then now the next step will be what we're doing right here, right now. And like I said, we have already got it started on some of that stuff, and it's looking good, starting small, and we're building up to it. It's going to be a really good year here in 2024. Thank you guys so much for joining. Please, if you're interested in following as we build this car, please hit subscribe. Please follow us on social media. It lets us be able to do more of this. Lets us be able to kind of do what we need to do here. So thank you so much. We'll see you next week.